In Canada, a group of young members of the Ismaili Volunteer Corps, starting from age 3, are learning to give service. They also discuss the importance of voluntary service. On the other side of the world in Singapore, youth volunteers are performing similar tasks. These youth are among the newest members of a tradition of uniformed Ismaili volunteers around the world. Beginning in Bombay in British India, the Ismaili Volunteer Corps has served the Imamate, the Jamaat, and wider society for the past century.
There was a group called Vidya Vinod Club, which was involved in literary activities. There were members who were doing research, writing papers, and they thought of coming up with some organized body, an organized institution, which could be there to support the community, to the fellow human beings, help and protect people at the times of difficulties. And they thought of coming up with an organized body of volunteers.
Thus, the first systematic organization of uniformed volunteers came into existence in 1919. They came to be known as His Highness the Aga Khan's Bombay Volunteer Corps. However, this is a tradition that stretches back 14 centuries to the beginnings of Islam.
For Muslims, the ethic of service is an ethic rooted in the teachings of the Quran Sharif, where service to Allah, to community, to society, in fact, to humanity at large, is an integral part of faith. Muslims are entrusted with the care and protection of their fellow human beings. They're enjoined to do good, to help, to share, and to do that with kindness and compassion.
Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, in his words and actions, lived this ethic of service to others. He is believed to have said, quote, "None among you is a true believer unless he loves for others what he loves for himself," unquote. Muslims throughout history have drawn inspiration from the Prophet's example and teachings. The values of generosity, kindness, and serving others have remained important in many Muslim communities throughout history. This tradition of service has also been a part of the history of the Shia Ismaili community in various regions of the world, under the guidance and leadership of the Imams.
Through centuries, we have read and heard about Ismailis who have given of their wealth. They've shared, they've taught, they have written, they have given of their expertise and skills, whether that be in building or in developing agriculture. They have looked after the poor and the elderly and the weak, particularly when it came to offering refuge to those in need. It was not just for the benefit of the Ismaili community, but also for other communities in need who sought protection of the Ismailis. So this ethic of service is one deeply rooted in a long-standing tradition of the Ismailis.
The Ismaili Volunteer Corps, founded in 1919, is part of this tradition of service. The early founders of this organization are well known.
The person who was a pioneer in this, who was also the president of Vidya Vinod Club, was a gentleman called Pir Muhammad Madhani. Now, Pir Muhammad Madhani was later the Lieutenant Colonel of the Ismaili Volunteer Corps in India. And he, along with Major Lakpati and a couple of other members of the Vidya Vinod Club, came together and established an organized body and named it His Highness Aga Khan's Bombay Volunteer Corps.
Their first duty was performed at the gateway of India, where they received Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam on his arrival in Bombay. The following day, the Imam visited the Jamaat.
A visit was organized for the Jamaat at Aga Halwadi, and Imam Sultan Musa was supposed to arrive there, and the Jamaat was waiting for them. And Pir Muhammad Madhani gets the volunteers and organizes the event. Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah sees this. He is very impressed, and he congratulates the team.
Following colonial military style, the early volunteer corps organized themselves into ranks, had a specific number of members, and wore khaki-colored uniforms. In 1920, Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah granted the use of a coat of arms.
Imam Sultan Musa offered his own crest, Taj, to be used as the coat of arms for the Ismaili volunteers. The initial volunteer uniform was khaki. They wore a grayish-black cap, and on cap they had this Taj. But we do see that in late 40s the uniform changes and more colors are added. We see the colors of the Ismaili flag being used in the cap, and various medals that were used. So we see green and red appearing in the uniform now. And later on, as the Jamaat moved to various countries, we see that uniform changes.
On another occasion, the Imam made a surprise announcement to the leadership of the volunteer corps.
Imam Sultan Shah says that I am the colonel of this organized body. And he says, where is my uniform? And we have images of Imam Sultan Shah wearing that uniform and actually having a photograph taken with the volunteers of the time.
In 1922, Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah appointed his son, Prince Ali Khan, as the patron of the volunteers. Later, in 1944, he was made the colonel of the organization. The initial purpose of the early uniformed volunteers was for the safety and security of the Jamaat, and to organize events and visits of the Imam in a dignified and disciplined manner. In 1919, it was an organization for men only.
We are talking about the post-First World War period, where the safety was a major concern, and this group of people actually looked after the Jamaat. So that was the main role of the group in the initial period.
लेडीज़ वॉलंटियर कोर की स्थापना हज़रत इमाम सुल्तान मोहम्मद शाह ने 1921 में की थी। वो टाइम पे 3 यूनिट्स थे, करीमाबाद, हसनाबाद, दरखाना। और वो ज़माना ऐसा था कि लेडीज़ वॉलंटियर मीन्स जो बिफोर 98 इयर्स इतना एजुकेशन नहीं था, इतनी फैसिलिटीज़ नहीं थी। देन टू वो लोग इतना वर्क करते थे सब जमात खाने में। जब भी हज़रत इमाम सुल्तान मोहम्मद शाह की पदरामनी हुए तो जमात की देख रेख रखते थे, उनकी सेवा करते थे, उन लोग को जो भी मतलब चाहिए वो उनकी नीड्स पूरी करते थे। और बाहर भी सब बाहर का भी मीन्स सोशल वर्क भी करते थे कि जब तभी अपने को इंडिपेंडेंस नहीं था।
If you closely look at the uniform being used in India by the women volunteers, you see a dupatta, a scarf, and on scarf you see a pattern of flowers. If you go close and look at it carefully, what you see is the letters IVC engraved in those flower petals. And those letters stand for Ismaili Ladies Volunteer Corps. And we've been told that Prince Ali Salman Khan himself approved this design. So we know that various groups evolved over a period of time. We also know that Ismaili scouting, because there were children who wanted to join voluntary services, and scouting was introduced.
From its roots in Bombay, the tradition of uniformed volunteers immediately began to spread to other Jamaats and centres. The same year, in 1919, Karachi's first uniformed volunteer corps was founded at Garden Jamaat Khana by Mukhi Bande Ali Muhammad, under the leadership of President Meher Ali Kimani.
They inspired that in Karachi we may also have such volunteer corps to serve the Jamaat in a well-disciplined manner. About 40 youths at that time came forward and offered their services for the Jamaat and the Imam. So the volunteer corps in Karachi and Mumbai, both were established in 1919.
Once the organized body was created in Mumbai, it spread to various centers of India. And as Jamaat started moving from Gujarat and various parts of India to Africa, we know that Waras Ibrahim Jamal, on his visit to Bombay from Kisumu, Kenya, met with Major Lakpati. And Major Lakpati coached him in introducing an organized uniformed volunteers in Kisumu, Kenya. So we know that as early as 1923-24, Volunteer Corps moves from India to Africa.
The institution continued to spread throughout the Indian subcontinent into various regions of East Africa and then other parts of the world.
In 1947, when the partition of India was made, so they created two states, Pakistan and India. So many members from India, they migrated and came to Karachi and other parts of Pakistan. So volunteers used to go to receive them, to give them comfort, and to bring them to camps, and then to guide them.
जी इस्माइली जमात के लिए जो मसाइल थे गिलगित में माशी मसाइल थे, जैसे मैंने कहा कि और दूसरे मसाइल से दो चार थी, तो उसमें वॉलंटियर्स का बड़ा अहम रोल था। तो इसलिए कि जमात को आबाद करने में उनके लिए पानी का चैनल निकालना है, उनके लिए रोड निकालना है, उनके लिए जो है ना घर बनाना है, जमात खाना बनाना है, नाइट स्कूल बनाना है, ये तमाम कामों में वॉलंटियर्स का ही रोल होता था।
जमात में जब मुश्किलात आती थी तो जमात खाने में आकर छोटे लंगर कहते हैं हम, वहाँ लंगर में जमा करते थे, वहाँ बाहर लोगों से खाना मंगवा के इनको खिलाते थे, इनको बिस्तर देते हैं, वही हमारा काम होता है।
In 71, as we all know, Bangladesh came into being. Bangladesh became a separate country. And at that time, people were moving away. Some moved away to different areas, some moved to different countries. And volunteerism was not even felt at that time because the size of the Jamaat had shrunk considerably. In Aminabad Jamaat Khana, it was a very small number of Jamaats, where the uniformed volunteerism had not yet come into being. Gradually, volunteerism came into being in Aminabad Jamaat Khana.
Singapore Jamaat was established in 1932. Early history of the volunteers in Singapore started off with a few individuals coming together to assist with the daily Jamaati task. Jamaat in Singapore was very small, with only about 50 people at that time. As the Jamaat grew, the number of informal, non-uniform volunteers also grew. This called for the more formalized volunteer organization, which led to the creation of the uniform Ismaili volunteer corps and uniform junior volunteer corps.
In 1972, all Asians were expelled from Uganda, including thousands of Ismailis. Many settled in Europe and North America, leading to the rapid growth of the Jamaat in the West. Before 1972, the Jamaat in the United Kingdom was made up mostly of students from other countries.
In 1973, when the Uganda Jamaat came in, it was a little bit difficult for us to handle it, but we did it. And then I was appointed as a major. Then I had established IVC captains, lieutenants. And then we also appointed captains for all those small Jamaat Khanas so they can run in a better way.
Other countries in Europe also saw the establishment of significant Jamaats. Many members of the France Jamaat migrated from Madagascar, a former French colony. In the late 1970s, the French Jamaat began organizing a volunteer corps, which was formally established in 1980. In Portugal, the roots of the Jamaat lie predominantly in Mozambique, a former Portuguese colony. They also carried with them the tradition of volunteerism as they travelled.
Vim de Lourenço Mares, Moçambique, há 45 anos, mais ou menos. Trabalho nos meus voluntariado desde os meus 8 anos em Moçambique. Viemos para 74, vim em 74 em Portugal. Começamos a trabalhar no Jamaat Khané, onde era no cinema Lumiar.
In addition to Europe, the first Jamaats were also established during this period in North America. In Toronto, Canada, a number of temporary Jamaat Khanas were established as the size of the Jamaat grew following the Uganda crisis.
In 1972, when officially established the Volunteer Corps, there was about 30 of us.
We didn't have any permanent Jamaat Khana, and after a year we started to have Jamaat Khana, and at that time the volunteers, gents volunteers especially, were doing very hard job because they had to lay the carpets and everything, and then at the end of the day they have to pack everything, put it under the stage.
In the United States, the Uniformed Volunteer Corps began to be established there as early as 1969 in Chicago and spreading to other centres through the 1970s and 80s.
And the very first Jamaat Khana we started volunteering was the first institution that we built. So even though out of 10 we had only one volunteer, but he was nicely fitted with the uniform and the tie and everything else, that he stood out because he became the face, like today, he became the face of the Jamaat.
In Australia and New Zealand, a small Jamaat had established by the 1970s. One of the early catalysts for volunteering was a visit by Mawlana Hazar Imam to Australia in 1979.
It's a very small Jamaat at the time, approximately about 150 to 200 members. And all the members, all the Jamaatic members participated in various voluntary capacities.
Following the crisis in 1972, the Jamaat eventually began to re-establish itself in Uganda. Amin Megani served as Major for Uganda from 1992 to 1994, during which time a formalised volunteer corps was restarted.
We formally introduced the IVC uniforms and the IVC Rules and Regulations Guidebook, which inspired and motivated the volunteers to serve the Jamaat.
The first Jamaati institutions were established in Afghanistan in 2002. It was at this time that the tradition of volunteerism in the Jamaat was formalized into a uniformed volunteer corps.
امروز در افغانستان فعالیت‌هایی که رضاکاران انجام میتن به نحو مختلفی است که هم در سطح جماعتخانه‌ها صورت میگیره که از رسومات گرفته از صفایی و مثلا از شوز کمپانی، واتر کمپانی، تمام موضوعاتی که داخل جماعتخانه اکتیویتی یا رسومات میشه رضاکارا در او اینوالو هستن. در پالی ازی نه تنها وقتی در سطح جماعتخانه‌ها کار میکنن، کمیته هایی که در سطح کانسول، در سطح اداره طریقه و تعلیمات مذهبی است، با تمام کمیته ها همکاری دارن، منبرای از اونها هستن و در سطح جماعتخانه همکاریشان میکنن. و در پالی ازی ما اطفالایی که خوردی که جونیور والنترها داریم.
Mawlana Hazar Imam formally established Jamaati institutions in Tajikistan in 2012, at which time the Ismaili Centre Dushanbe became the first Jamaat Khana to operate in that country. While volunteers assist with tasks at the Ismaili Centre and the newly opened Jamaat Khana in Khorog, the tradition of uniformed volunteers is still being formalised in Tajikistan and the region.
يعني دو اكشيش ماش خدمتي في دخوري تلفان برو دورين دلوت ماش بابين دورين دلوت انا كده خدمتي في دخورين دلوت كي امچون كريار عندي كده يعني بمعنى دي ايكو آدم نیازمند سوادوی خورمالای چه میزودو یا وز خور چه میزودو ای چیز غلا کار چه چیز سواد یا توقع از بیچی دو نفرداد ایک به مومنت اندیفاردو ودین آدمین مثال به قومیاتت و امسایینت و اوکنوین ودین یدخو ودین وری یاردم چود ایک کریارن ایکت ودی دیانه ودین به پولس کار چود اینو روزن ماش مسیک ماش جوانند خدمت افتخاره دوام صدادم اید از ماش با بین ماشر یعنی من چون سنت ماشن اید از وی ماشر میروز.
In Syria, an informal body of volunteers had existed for many years. In the past decade, steps have been taken to begin formalising the volunteers in Salamiyya into a uniformed volunteer corps.
لما كنت ببريطانيا ضميت لفرق العمل الطوعي بالإسماعيلي سنتر، وبعد فترة أصبحت أوفيسر. لما رجعت على سوريا حبيت أبقى جزء من العمل الطوعي، لكن حبيت إنه أقدم شيء من التعديلات للعمل الطوعي داخل المساجد كان يقبل بعد التحسين. بدأنا بأحد المساجد بسلمية، ومع المتطوعين الموجودين بالمسجد نظمنا العمل من حيث اللباس الموحد، وضوح الفرق الموجودة، شكل تنظيمي إشرافي. وانطلقنا بعد عدة أشهر من التطبيق ونجاح الفكرة، حبينا ننشرها وضعنا خطة لنشرها على أكثر من باقي المساجد.
وقد تعزز دور والتزام العمل الطوعي أثناء الأزمة من خلال دعم المؤسسات والبرامج المتنوعة، وظهرت مساهمة العمل الطوعي بشكل مميز وفعال في عمليات الاستجابة لتداعيات الأزمة، مثل تحضير وتوزيع المساعدات الإنسانية والاستجابة لمختلف الحالات الطارئة الطبيعية والبشرية.
Throughout its history, the Ismaili Volunteer Corps has aimed to serve the needs of the Jamaat. However, within the ethic of improving the quality of life of all of humanity, the volunteers have also served wider society on many occasions. This has always been an important part of their work from early on, and this tradition continues in many countries today.
There was a flood in 1929 in Saurashtra and Gujarat, and again we see that Ismaili volunteers being present. In 1930, the Bombay Police Commissioner actually requests Ismaili Volunteer Corps to provide a team of trained, qualified volunteers who could look after the safety and the visit of the Governor General.
सिस्टर कम्युनिटी के साथ सर कोई अल्लाह ना करे कोई कुदरती आफात आ जाए। मसलन 2010 में यहाँ आगे एक गांव रहीमाबाद गांव है, वहाँ फ्लड शलट आ गई है तो रोड ब्लॉक हो गई है, गाड़ियाँ नहीं चलती थी। वहाँ लोग मैदान आसमान तले बैठे हुए थे। उनकी खिदमत के लिए डीसी साहब ने मुझे रिंग करके बुलाया। उन्होंने कहा कि मेरे पास तो चंद एक मुलाजिम है, इनके थ्रू मैं कुछ भी नहीं कर सकता हूँ, तो इसलिए आप एज ए वॉलंटियर इस्माइली वॉलंटियर मेजर हैं, तो मैं आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि आप अपने वॉलंटियर्स हमें दे दें ताकि यहाँ कुछ खेमे शेमे हैं, कुछ शाही खुर्दनोश है, इनको कुछ अद्वियात हैं, उनको वहाँ तक पहुँचाना है। फिर मैंने 60 जवानों को लेकर पैदल यहाँ से शाम को चला और रात 12 बजे वहाँ पहुँचे। वहाँ खेमे लगाया, वहाँ कुछ अद्वियात की ज़रूरत थी, कुछ खाने पीने की अशिया की ज़रूरत थी, उन तक पहुँचाया। फिर सुबह वहाँ से हम वापस यहाँ आ गए।
ઘણા વર્ષોથી વોલેન્ટિયર્સ એવરી 3 મંથના ઓર્ફનેજમાં જાય છે અને ત્યાં બચ્ચાઓને એક બચ્ચા માટે ફૂડ પેકિંગ કરીને એ લોકોને જ્યારે સ્કૂલનો ટાઈમ હોય છે ત્યારે સ્કૂલની બુક્સ, સ્કૂલ બેગ એવું બધું પેક કરી અને પર્સનલી એક બચ્ચાને આપણે આપવા માટે જાય છે ઓર્ફનેજની અંદર.
Recently, a few years back, a building collapsed in the center of the city. We were there in part of the clearing of the debris. We were there in part of the security management at that time. We were also a major part in serving food and hot drinks to people who were clearing up those debris and everything. And we forged together as a community, as one humanity, in part of that calamity.
We as volunteers had gathered a lot of clothes and food items, non-perishable items, and we went to Nyeri with the whole volunteer teams at that time, and we met small young children and adults over there, Muslim adults and young children, and we fed them lunch and then we gave them the clothes. The tears in their eyes when they received those goods, it was such a touching moment that we could outreach and give poor people those clothings and food.
امانگی درسیم قد چیز نیالشانی که سری جماعت خانه عمر کرد کلگی من رفتیم دمیل وقتی هولندتری رفتیم چی شغالی کابل بود چی اونجا سرگیدو بود اونجا کدام چی هست اونجا کدام مکتب هست و تمام مکتب نیالشانی میکنیم.
We have been involved in numerous outreach activities to benefit both the society and the environment, such as Ramadan on Wheels, where the Jamaat donated food rations to the less privileged. Jamaat also helped to clean up the East Coast beach in the Singapore to mark Earth Day.
We have events like blood drive. We go for feeding the homeless. We do harmony walks. We do fundraising walks. All of that. So the volunteers are actively involved and are take part in those events as well.
We know there are families out there who can't afford food. Why don't we go and prepare a meal for them? There's families in need of a home. Why don't we take our time out and give back to the community and say, let's go ahead and help them build a home.
Our volunteers in Canada are much more involved in outreach activities now than they've ever been. And we came up with an expression through the anniversary of Canada being 150 years to give 1 million hours of service. And that really sparked a movement in Canada as to find ways to actually bring the Ismaili volunteer to the external community.
And that type of service to society as a civic responsibility is something also we're seeing in our Jamaat. This commitment completely of humility, of tolerance, of respect, being able to serve society is an amazing phenomenon in our Jamaat.
Throughout the past century, the Ismaili Volunteer Corps have been concerned with the safety and security of the Jamaat, as well as helping to organise large events with decorum and dignity. In the life of the Jamaat, no event is more significant than that of the visit of the Imam of the time. The very first duty performed by the Bombay Volunteer Corps in 1919 was to receive Mawlana Sultan Muhammad Shah and to organise his visit to India. From that time to the global celebration of Mawlana Hazar Imam's Diamond Jubilee in Lisbon in 2018, one of the most important and enriching forms of service offered by the volunteers globally over the past century is to serve at a mulaqat of the Imam of the time.
They are there to serve the Jamaat, and Hazar Imam holds them in the highest esteem of service. He is always in admiration of the service, the way in which the volunteers position themselves with humility, with love, with commitment, that they give that service.
I'm aware of all the effort, time, and other resources which volunteers and innumerable people from all walks of life have offered to make this mulaqat possible. I convey to all of them my warm and deep gratitude and my admiration for their collective effort.
Why do I volunteer? This is something that I cannot put into words, because it's a feeling that comes within.
मुझे अपनी इन खिदमत से जो फ़ायदे हासिल हुए हैं, मैं अगर चाहूँ भी तो मैं आपको इस इंटरव्यू में क्या, अगर आप मुझसे सारा दिन भी इंटरव्यू लें तो मैं आपको वो ब्लेसिंग्स बता नहीं सकता कि मुझे क्या फ़ायदे हासिल हुए हैं.
Everything, every single day, every single moment that I give my seva and forsake my time for helping the people, as Mawlana Haji Imam says, is just memories. Everything. For the past 5 years, memory.
It is our ethic. It is an ethic of our service that has been instilled in us since we were younger.
ما برای زنده نگهداری مذهب و برای پیشرفت جماعت و برای انکشاف دادن هر گونه مسائلی که امروز در جماعت ما بعضی از مشکلات‌ها هستند، این خدمت افتخاری ما میتوانیم توسط این مشکلات‌ها و پرابلم‌هایی که در جماعت هستند آنها را ما حل کنیم.
At the end, I get a joy, an internal feeling that you cannot describe anywhere. And to answer this question, I did it for myself, because this is one of the principles that we have to put in your life, service to the other.
I think it creates an incredible amount of happiness to do work for other people, without any sort of expectations. It's something that is a really unique feeling.
IVC is not only where you do seva, you also learn quite a lot of things like leadership skills.
C'est une école où on apprend à être humble, le respect, etc. Donc j'ai démarré comme ça.
We make links around the world and it brings us together. It's part of our faith. And not only that, it gives you opportunities to learn.
When I help other people, I have this feeling that makes me really happy.
Happiest people aren't the ones who are focused on getting, but are the ones who are focused on giving, even if it's a fraction.
I think seva has always been close to my heart because it's always given me an inner satisfaction.
volunteer خدمات کو بچه هاش مقصد لکیز میگه مثلا بوزیده مثلا خوشنی حاصل بیان انا خدمات کو بوزیده خوشنی هاش بین کی جنت سکون مثلا روحت سکون ترنی حتی سو جست مثلا اسپکی لالسن کی مثلا دوری هان پریشان نبیان صحت کی لولتا مثلا صحت کی لولتا صحت کی لولتا مثلا دوری اجلن کی هاش اسمه چمتان کی مثلا صحت کی بوزیده اسم مثلا خوشن حالات هست اسپکی از زندگی پای خیلی بیرا.
Serving unconditionally and compassionately is a very humbling and fulfilling experience. It gives me happiness and inner satisfaction.
Und was mich dazu motiviert, Seva zu machen, ist zum einen der innere Friede und zum anderen auch die Liebe zur Jamaat und zu unserem Imam.
Porque eu sou a geração futura e temos de ser nós a dar o próximo passo e dar continuidade ao trabalho dos mais velhos.
مثلا لما اجيت على كندا كثير الناس ساعدوني هون بدون اي مقابل، فهي شيء كثير متعة حقيقية انه تساعد الناس او ترد كجزء من اللي عملوه او تساعد الناس اللي بدها تجي بعدك.
It's become a part of my day-to-day life and can't even think about going without it.
Khidmat gave me inner happiness, and I wish, I pray till my last breath I can serve to Imam and his institution at whatever capacity I have.
It helps me spiritually as well as brings a lot of happiness in my life.
I get satisfaction. I really get satisfaction serving the Imam in Jamaat. And I would pray that I get this seva until my end.
मौला के पास दुआ करती हूँ कि बस आखिर दम तक मौला तू तेरे घर की सेवा कराना.
From Bombay in 1919 until today, wherever the Jamaat has lived, the tradition of organised uniformed volunteers has spread and thrived. This is rooted in a long tradition of service that stretches back to the beginnings of Islam. The members who have served the Ismaili Volunteer Corps around the world have selflessly given of their time to improve the quality of life of the Jamaat and wider society. Rooted in a sense of love and devotion to the Imam of the time, the Ismaili Volunteer Corps today has grown into a remarkable global institution.
Well, I would say to you, continue this wonderful service that the Imam has always talked about. Inculcate this in the young men and women so that they can continue generations after generations this service for not only there to serve the Jamaat, but serve society at large, but also with that, make your Imam happy.
I am fortunate to lead an international community with a strong social conscience, bridging north and south, east and west. The Ismailis have a long tradition of philanthropy, self-reliance, and voluntary service. Wherever they live, they faithfully abide by the Quranic ethic of a common humanity and a dignity of man. They willingly pool knowledge and resources with all those who share our social ethic to help improve the quality of life of less fortunate men, women, and children. During my Golden Jubilee, Ismailis from around the world volunteered their gifts, not only of wealth, but most notably of time and knowledge in support of our work. We established a Time and Knowledge framework, a structured process for engaging an immense pool of expertise involving tens of thousands of volunteers. Many of them traveled to the developing countries as part of this outpouring of service. Their impact has been enormous in helping us to achieve best practice standards in our institutions and programs.
The notion of sharing knowledge, the notion of giving of one's intellectual capacity for the improvement of quality of life of others has been a central ethic in Islam since the beginning.
Together and you divide by 3, that is roughly 2 millimeters.
I think there is a familial tradition right from probably grandfather and father and all the brothers and even children and nieces and nephews. We are all involved in the seva, and this is our lifeblood.
Just the financial saving on recruiting a professor level intervention cardiologist is massive. I mean, I would not want to give a number, but it's massive savings. The whole attitude to train local staff and the whole approach towards mentoring the local folks, that is so much more valuable than the financial savings. That cannot be quantified.
For us, the TKN volunteer is not a replacement for somebody who's paid. They actually bring knowledge and expertise that we don't have and cannot get in the countries where we work. In food services, where we had a volunteer who still works with us as a TKN volunteer part-time, and from a distance monitors, supports, advises our people on the campuses, has helped save the university over $1 million a year just in cost savings, in better buying, in better efficiencies, and also that's in addition to improved quality and improved nutritious value of the food.
We created healthy food and meals and eliminated use of sodium, sugar levels, and fat content in meals throughout the campus.
The monies that we saved from efficiency and purchasing better and in utilizing ingredients much better, that money can go to patient welfare. So it would help patients who would otherwise not be able to afford the care, but in this way we can now support more patients than we were able to do previously.
I felt that coconut water was better. Kenya had no recycling program, so we did not know where to put these plastic bottles. And the coconut water had nutritional benefits. It also helped with the local economy. I went to a street in Mombasa and got a coconut seller to come to the school with hundreds of coconuts. That improved his lot in life.
75% of the volunteers that we've used in the last 10 years have been TKN volunteers. What is striking about the statistics when we look at them is that on average a TKN assignment allows us to educate one child from a rural area that would have had no opportunity for such an education. Completely changes their lives and gives them the opportunity to then impact their families, their communities, and their societies.
Every time I make an announcement in my reception area that I'm going to be away from this date to that date, they come into my room and say, "Vacation again?" And I have to explain to them, and they say, yeah, now my patients know. They say, "We know you're going to go do volunteer work. It's okay, go ahead, good for you." There is a lot of pleasure in seeing a community get better. There's a lot of pleasure in seeing people having confidence in their own local doctors and utilizing them well. Health is a prerequisite for education economic. If you don't have health, you cannot pursue your education, you cannot pursue a good profession.
When opportunities came to formally serve somewhere and use my professional expertise, I did it because it gives a great deal of personal satisfaction. It is not something you can go around bragging about, it is not something you can describe. Anybody who wants to come along here, your attitude should be, I'm here to serve, to give.
And we should actually be putting it in.
Come to the institutions with that sense of a gift to the Imam of your time and knowledge. Don't come with expectations, because there are enormous opportunities that are available to you, and chances are you will gain far more from it than you will have actually pledged, because it's an enormous gift that you will be presenting to the Imam, and the blessing of that the barakat of that is almost 1,000% or more.
From a personal perspective, I've grown so much as an individual. My appreciation for the world and people has changed drastically. I think I've become a very simple creature. I appreciate the little things now. And from a professional perspective, I feel like I have a 360-degree kind of knowledge base now. I understand that not everything comes as easily as sometimes it does in Canada, because there are hurdles that I wouldn't be aware of if I wasn't here.
TKNs have been very, very good, both in terms of rapidly producing the results, but also producing those results at the right quality. Gaps which otherwise would have cost us exorbitant sums of money, those gaps we've filled with the right kinds of skills and motivation at a very affordable, or in our case, almost no cost. It's like a shot in the arm of energy to the organization.
Volunteers are our core and key element to the work that we do. What we have been able to get with volunteers, and with the TKN volunteers in particular, is an increase in capacity. increase in talent, increase in the efficiency with which we can provide service to the Jamaat.
I was a teenager at the time when there was a civil war in Tajikistan, and that was a major conflict that influenced my life and the life of people around me, and especially our generation. I see alternative dispute resolution as a very effective way of mitigating conflict.
There is a lot of satisfaction when you conduct a training, which is a 5-day, 40 hours training, and then later on you see the trainees when they're already working with the communities, and they refer to you sometimes even as a teacher, which is a very respectful form, and you realize that indeed that little contribution that you try to make, it gets there, it makes a little change, and that is a very rewarding experience.
I can safely say that we've changed the way mediations or dispute resolution was being practiced in the Jamaat. In the end, when the program ends, I had women saying thank you. There cannot be any more bigger reward than that. It was just amazing. It was heartwarming, it was breathtaking. That these are like 60-year-old, 70-year-old women, you know, and they sat through their training program, took very active part in it. At the end, they said thank you for, you know, training us and letting us know how to go forward in this. So nothing beats that. It's the amount of satisfaction you get out of that, nothing beats that.
You know, the work that I have done in early childhood and seeing what impact the programs have on children and their families. What research tells us about those earliest moments in life where you start developing the capacities of children, which have far-reaching benefits into adulthood. These are seeds that we're planting just now, and I hope that, you know, I'm still around 20 or 30 years from now to be able to see these children now who we've been working with and to see what contribution they end up making.
In order to know how to approach each child, you should be highly qualified in psychology, in pedagogy, and this is what we are getting from our professional volunteers who are much ahead in their education system.
Absolutely, TKN is the way to go, and it doesn't necessarily have to be internationally. It could be in your own community at home as well. But assess your goals. Don't use TKN as a means to an end, and remember that it's there really as a service to the Jamaat and to the institution.
Be prepared to take on new challenges, but also be prepared that there would be so much more coming as a result of it, and so many new opportunities that you could never even think of.
Jump in both the feet, because this is an opportunity given by the Imam, should not miss it.
They should be fully prepared to be flexible. Very often the assignment is written out as one thing. When you come to the field, you may be expected to do something else, or you may find that the ground is not ready to do what they wanted to be done, and you come in as a professional and identify 2 or 3 prerequisites that need to be accomplished, and they look at you and say, so can you work on those? And you go, yeah, but I wanted to work on number 5 and you want me to do number 1 to 4. And you have to be flexible because there's pleasure in reaching that number 5 as well.
Time is number 1. You're giving time, contributing to something that is good for it. You're not the owner, we have to realize that. And similarly with the knowledge. Knowledge can be divided into the intellect, learned knowledge, acquired knowledge, but finally the intellect is God's gift from which the knowledge comes.
Hazar Imam's future vision of this endeavor is not to be specifically tied to a Jubilee, in other words, a spike that you offer it only at the time of a Jubilee, but to having a structure in place that will allow murids at any time of their life who wish to come forward to offer their generosity of intellectual capacity, that we can have the ability to accept that and take it on. Even though it is a gift from them to the Imam, for him it is important that they actually go away thinking, I gained more out of that experience than I have actually gifted. That there's this sense of fulfillment, there's this sense of satisfaction, there's this sense of feeling I really contributed to something.
Our many thanks and our gratitude to the professional volunteers from the world who are just offering their service just from the bottom of their heart, being very sincere, and to become source of motivation. I want to thank you, all of you.
Humility.
Contribution.
Seva.
Passion.
Unconditional.
Enriching experience.
Serving the Imam.
Strength of the Jamaat.
Dedication.
Giving back.
Life-changing. Gratitude.
Love to Imam.